Hey folks, welcome back. Well, wouldn't you know it, we are just about done with our textbook for the semester. I hope you have enjoyed reading it and have gotten some good knowledge out of it. I like it, I think I've made it clear that I love this book, and I'll keep it around for my own use. But I hope you liked it too. There's one more chapter that talks about breaking the rules, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. At the beginning of the book, remember there was um, right before the first chapter, there were 20 rules for good design, and it kind of gave you examples and explained those. Well, in the back, after we've kind of gone through and learned a little bit about all this, it talks about breaking the rules and when and why and how you should do that if you're going to. And basically, there's a quote at the beginning of this that I think kind of sums it up. It says, "If a design doesn't feel good in your heart, what the mind thinks doesn't matter." And there's another one, "Don't expect theory to determine how things look." And basically, what they're trying to say is, there are rules and guidelines. They're guidelines. There aren't really rules in design, but there are guidelines to kind of help you get started and to help you evaluate design and see what works, and kind of helps you to kind of get an idea before you start of gives you a direction to go in. But rules are made to be broken, and there are always circumstances that would where breaking these rules would be a good idea, a good option. So I just want to go through these real quick and kind of make sure you understand what they're talking about. The first one, it says, first rule is have a concept. And that's, to me, that is one of the most important things about design is having a concept and a big idea. And that's really what's going to drive your design. And, laying it out on the page is just, a good way to implement the idea. But sometimes design gets in the way. And that's basically for just relaying information. That's when you don't need a concept. And to give some examples in here. But a lot of times the purpose or what you want to do is just relay the information as clearly and concisely as possible. And if you have, fancy ornamentation or, cool graphics and stuff, that's just going to get in the way. So depending on what it is, if you're doing a website, if you're trying to sell a product, or, like they have an art museum website in here where really the art is the design. So you don't need to do anything else. You just kind of need to give a structure behind it. So in that case, having a concept really is not necessary. The second one, it says communicate, don't decorate. And that is, they're just saying every part should have a meaning and should be able to communicate your message, and it should all work together to, improve the communication of your message. Unless, depending on the project, it might be something where, ornamentation is a good thing. Where you just want it to look fancy or jumbled or chaotic, in which case just throwing a bunch of elements in might be a good option. So keep that in mind. And as we're going through these rules, remember, approach all of these with caution. Make sure that you're aware what the result is going to be when you break these rules, because there's going to be some kind of effect, and you need to be sure that that's the effect that you want, that you're going for. The third one says speak with one visual voice. And that's, we talked about design systems where there's, a bunch of things in a series that still, give the impression that they're part of a whole. And that is very common in graphic design. I'd say, 80% of graphic design includes, it involves using design systems. But sometimes, you might not want to do that. And they gave a really good example here where they did a poster series for this jazz festival, and there's no branding whatsoever. They all look completely different, all these different posters. But that goes along with their concept of the improvisational nature of jazz music and how widely different it can be. So I think that's successful. There might be other instances where that would work too. Or if you're trying to show something that has that changes all the time. If maybe you're doing about a piece about a chameleon or something, you'd want each piece to look different. So number 4, use 2 typeface families maximum, or 3. And that is, pretty much a good rule to live by. There are a few rare occasions when you might want to have more than that. Um, Usually, if you're doing, decoration or ornamentation with, maybe words in the background, and you want to have a bunch of different fonts to kind of create this textural background, it might work. Um, or if you're, you know, I don't know. There are times when that could be used, but I tend to shy away from that, and I like to use very limited number of fonts, just because it gets crazy without it. You don't really have a lot of control. Um, Number 5, use the 1-2 punch, and that's basically just saying, um, you know, you need to lead your viewer. You need to have a focal point, and then first place they look, and then a second place, and kind of lead them around the page, in the way you want them to. But sometimes you might not want that. Sometimes you might want to put everything there with the same emphasis, maybe evenly spaced, and the same size and all that kind of stuff. So then it's up to the viewer to kind of, it kind of engages the viewer, and they look around, and it's up to them to decide where they look first. It's not really something that's been decided for them. That's again, there's very rare circumstances when you would want everything on the page to have equal emphasis. Generally, you want a focal point, but number 6, pick colors on purpose. Sometimes, generally, you want your colors to complement the message. If you're doing something about air conditioning, you probably want it to be blue or a cool color. You don't want it to be red, because people are going to think hot, and that's not good when you're selling an air conditioner. But there might be cases where picking random colors that really clash and don't go together might improve your message, might complement what you're trying to say. If you're talking about something like punk rock or something like that, where it's really abrasive, then maybe all these colors that clash might go together. So that might be an example when you'd want to break that rule. Number 7, if you can do it with less, then do it. And that's basically just talking about kind of minimalism and keeping a very simple design where you don't want too much to clutter up the page. But there is a design style where you have a very textural, layered effect with a lot of different things going on, and that's valid too. So that's it depends on what you're going for, what the end result is. Number 8, negative space is magical. Create it, don't just fill it up. And it says in the book even, okay, there's really no good way to break this rule. And that's true. Negative space is so important in kind of leading the eye and giving your design some kind of rhythm or balance or harmony. So if you just have everything crammed on a page with no space, it's just gonna piss off the viewer, because they're not gonna know where to look. It's gonna be very confusing, and you're probably not gonna get a lot out of that. But that being said, if you have maybe an area of negative space, juxtaposed to an area with a lot of stuff crammed in it with no negative space, it's going to increase that contrast of nothing to a bunch of something. So that's just a very blatant way of creating a kind of contrast. Number 9, treat the type as image as though it's just as important. And generally it is. Generally an image complements type and a type complements image, like we talked about. But there are times when the image needs to speak louder. Maybe the image is the focal point, and type, you don't want it to get in the way. So in that case, you would want to use very conservative type. Maybe small or light colored, or so it's not the focal point, so it doesn't really stick out. So it's kind of a secondary level of communication. Or a lot of times, what I tell people, you might just want to get rid of the type altogether. Sometimes, if there's a disconnect, if maybe the written word doesn't seem to be complementing the image, try getting rid of one or the other. Maybe just use the text, or maybe just use the image, and that might get your point across better.